The girl who watched her sister get everything. The perfume of Lily floated through the grand ballroom, mingling with the soft echoes of a string quartet. Everyone was dressed to perfection. Laughter sparkled like crystal in the air, and all eyes were on the radiant bride gliding down the aisle. But not mine. From the shadows behind a velvet curtain, I watched. I watched as my twin sister, Helena, lived the life that was meant to be mine. I wasn't supposed to exist. Not anymore. 20 years ago, we were born minutes apart in a small hospital in northern Vermont. Helena came first, crying boldly as if demanding the world to notice her. I came second, silent and struggling to breathe. They thought I wouldn't make it. So when our mother died during childbirth, my father made a decision. He took Helena home and left me behind. A nurse named Margaret couldn't bear to see me forgotten. She raised me in secret, moving us from town to town, never staying in one place long enough to be found. I grew up with no birthday cakes, no lullabies, no idea that a girl who looked just like me was living in the lap of luxury. Until 6 months ago, I found her photo in a magazine. Helena Lancaster, heiress to the Lancaster shipping empire, socialite, and newly engaged to Damien Rella, tech mogul with a jawline sculpted by power and ambition. She had my face. She had my life. And she was about to marry a man I had unknowingly loved from afar for years. Damien was the only escape I allowed myself. Watching interviews, reading about his work, his philanthropy. He had become a fantasy, a quiet obsession. I used to imagine what it would be like if someone like him ever saw me. Now he would. Not as the forgotten twin, but as the bride. It started with curiosity. I slipped into her world using borrowed identities, observing from afar. At first, I just wanted to see, to understand. But then I saw how she treated him. Helena was cruel. Behind the scenes, she mocked him, dismissed his ideas, rolled her eyes when he wasn't looking. To the world, she was the perfect partner. But I saw the truth. She didn't love him. And he deserved someone who did. Someone like me. I knew the wedding was in 3 months. A private affair, limited guest list, strict security. But there was one hole in the plan. Helena had a habit of disappearing to her private spa resort in the mountains every Thursday. No staff. No security. Just her. I waited. I followed. And one night, I made my move. Helena was relaxing in a silk robe, sipping champagne, eyes closed. She didn't even see me coming. "Who are you?" she hissed, staring at me like I was a ghost. "I'm you," I said calmly. Or rather, the you they tried to erase. She laughed at first. Then she screamed. I didn't hurt her. I didn't need to. She hit her head when she tripped running from me. Just a small injury. Nothing life-threatening, but enough to knock her unconscious. I made the call. A private ambulance. A special clinic that owed me a favor thanks to a certain file I acquired about their less-than-legal operations. She would be safe and silent. For just 1 week. Long enough. I had studied her voice, her mannerisms, her walk. My natural resemblance did the rest. The staff barely noticed. Her friends were too busy with wedding details. And Damien looked at me with such love that it made my breath catch. He thought I was her. But when he held my hand, when he whispered promises, when he kissed me, it felt real. Because for me, it was. And I was going to make him see that. The wedding day came. I wore the gown she had chosen. But I made one change. Underneath the lace and tulle, I sewed in a single pearl, the only thing Margaret ever gave me, a piece of truth hidden beneath layers of lies. I walked down the aisle as Helena, but I vowed to become more than just her shadow. I vowed to become his wife. Forever. The wedding night revelation. I thought the worst was behind me when I learned the truth about Mark. But I was wrong. The night after I opened the envelope, sleep became impossible. My heart wouldn't stop racing, and my mind kept looping the same thought. Why would someone send me those pictures? And why now? The next morning, I stood by the kitchen window with a cup of untouched coffee in my hands, staring blankly at the house next door. Mark's curtains were drawn. His car was gone. And for the first time in over a year, I realized I had no idea where he truly went when he wasn't with me. That afternoon, curiosity overpowered fear. I walked over, pretending to drop off a misdelivered package from the mailman. His door opened almost immediately. But it wasn't Mark. It was a woman. She looked to be around my age, with shoulder-length blonde hair and eyes that darted around like she was scanning for an escape. "Can I help you?" she asked politely, but her tone was tense. I held up the box. "This was in my mailbox. It has your address." She took it quickly. "Thanks. Sorry about the mix-up." I nodded and turned to leave. But as I walked away, something tugged at my gut. A sense of wrongness. A flicker of confusion. I had never seen her before. And yet she moved inside Mark's house like she'd lived there forever. That evening, I called Mark. No answer. I texted him. No reply. The next day, I waited and waited. Finally, at 11:42 p.m., my phone lit up. One message. "We need to talk. Tomorrow, 6 p.m. My place. Come alone." I stared at the screen, chills running down my spine. When I arrived the next day, the house looked the same, but something felt off. Mark opened the door. He looked tired, pale. He motioned for me to come in, and without saying a word, he walked toward the hallway. And that's when I noticed it. A door I'd never seen before. At the end of the hall, across from the guest bathroom. Slightly ajar. Just enough to see darkness. He stopped in front of it and turned to me. "Everything you think you know is about to change," he said. He pushed the door open. I took one hesitant step forward, and what I saw inside that room would shatter everything I believed about him, the room below the house. I stepped through the doorway, my breath catching as the smell of cold earth and old wood hit me. The room wasn't lit, but a faint orange glow flickered from somewhere below, as if the house itself was breathing. Mark handed me a flashlight. "You need to see it for yourself," he said. The narrow staircase creaked under my weight as I followed him downward. The deeper we went, the more the air thickened, like it was trying to suffocate the truth. At the bottom was a long corridor lined with shelves of documents, old photographs, and walls covered with maps and red string connecting points I couldn't yet understand. "What is this?" I whispered. Mark didn't answer right away. He walked to a cabinet, opened it, and pulled out a leather-bound folder. He placed it in my hands, staring at me as if waiting for something to break. Inside were surveillance photos of me, going to work, walking my dog, reading on the porch. Every move I had made for the last 6 months was documented. I staggered backward. "Why would you do this to me?" I demanded. "Because someone else was already watching you," he said, his voice low. "I just wanted to know who." He pulled back a dusty curtain at the end of the room, revealing a second door metal with a keypad. He entered a code. The door hissed open. Inside, monitors lit up. Dozens of them. Live feeds. All showing different angles of my house. "What is this, Mark?" He stepped forward, his face pale in the flickering light. I didn't set these up. They were already installed when I bought this place. And not just for your house. There are others. He tapped a monitor, and suddenly I was looking at my boss's office. Another screen flipped to my sister's apartment. A third to a stranger I didn't recognize. Whoever lived here before me was tracking people. Lots of them. So why didn't you go to the police? Mark looked me dead in the eye. Because the man who sold me this house is dead. And the woman who lived here before him vanished. A cold wave washed over me. Mark pointed to a dusty file labeled Subject 0021. My name was on the tab. You were one of the subjects, he said. And I think I was too. Suddenly, every strange coincidence, every moment that had felt slightly off, came flooding back. I had never been in control of my life. I had been watched, studied, maybe even manipulated. But by who? And why? As I stared at the glowing screens, a realization crept into my chest. This wasn't just about me and Mark. This was bigger. Much, much bigger. Subject 0021, I didn't sleep at all. Even with the weight of a luxury comforter over me, the cold that crept into my bones had nothing to do with temperature. It was fear. Not the kind that makes you scream. The kind that makes you silent. The kind that makes your breath shallow because you don't want to be heard. I replayed it all in my head again. The locked room. The old mirror with initials scratched into the frame. And that name Subject 0021. That wasn't mine. And yet, it was. Morning came slowly. The sunlight forced itself through the sheer white curtains, as if hesitant to witness what was happening in this house. A knock came at the door. Breakfast is ready, sweetheart, said Eleanor, sweetheart. How ironic. I opened the door with a fake smile, my insides tangled like a storm. She stood there with that maternal grace, like she was proud of her successful daughter. But all I saw was manipulation under makeup. I'll be down in a minute, I replied, watching her closely. Her eyes lingered on me for just a beat too long, like she was scanning me. Did she know? Downstairs, I played my part. I laughed when they laughed, smiled when they smiled. But inside, I was rewinding every interaction I had in this house since the moment I arrived. Every glance. Every awkward silence. Every, are you feeling okay, dear? It all made sense now. They weren't checking on me. They were checking if I had figured it out yet. After breakfast, I excused myself and went to the garden. Not because I cared about the roses, but because there was a bench with no cameras aimed at it, one of the only places in the house not under watch. I opened the small journal I had hidden in my sleeve pocket and began writing everything I remembered from the night before. The old mirror, the initials, the whispering noise from the floor vent, the name, Subject 0021. And then I turned to the back of the journal where I had tucked away something I'd stolen. A photo. One I'd found under the floorboard. It was aged and worn, but still clear. Two girls, barefoot, identical, holding hands, in a lab room. One wore a tag labeled 0021, the other 0022. That's when my hands began to shake. Because I wasn't just switched. I was created. The wedding wasn't about love. It wasn't about family. It was about a contract, a continuation, an experiment. I was meant to replace her, not because she ran away, because she wasn't viable. And I was the backup. I dropped the journal. My entire identity shattered like the mirror I had stared into the night before. My memories, my childhood, the random gaps I'd always chalked up to trauma, they weren't trauma. They were constructed. That night, I decided to sneak into the locked room again. I waited until the house dimmed, until their chatter turned to silence, until their glasses of wine were set down for the last time. I tiptoed down the stairs, heart pounding with every creak of the old wood. The door was still locked, but this time I was ready. I had swiped Eleanor's key from the hallway drawer earlier that day. It clicked open. The air inside was colder than outside. Files lined the shelves, cabinets, screens, medical photos, psychological evaluations, names. And in the middle of the room, on a clipboard, my name. Not my fake name, but my assigned one. Subject 0021, active replacement candidate. Underneath it, another line. To be merged with family estate via legal union. Emotional bonding appears successful. Memory stability, 72%. I wanted to scream, but I didn't. I grabbed the clipboard and turned around, only to find someone standing in the doorway. Not Eleanor, not James, not a servant. It was her, the original. Subject 0022. She stepped forward, half her face hidden in shadow, and said quietly, "You shouldn't have come here." I stared at her, my face, my eyes, my height, but something was wrong. She looked hollow. "Why?" I whispered. "Why did you let them do this?" She didn't blink. "Because I wanted out. And you were desperate to belong." But then she smiled, cold, tired, and maybe even sad. "You were never supposed to find out, sister." But it was too late. Because now that I knew the truth, I wasn't going to be part of their plan anymore. I was going to burn it all down. I wasn't the backup. I was the weapon. When she said the word sister, I didn't feel warmth. I felt a trigger being pulled inside me. Because I didn't grow up with her. I didn't share secrets in the dark. I didn't have tea parties and matching ribbons. No, all I had were monitors, cold lights, doctors who called me a subject instead of a child. And now the girl who got the life I was denied was standing in front of me like a ghost from a story I never got to live. She turned her back to me casually, like I wasn't a threat. "I'm not here to fight," she said. "I'm here to warn you." "Warn me?" I laughed, sharp, bitter. She paused by the desk. "They're done with you." "Done with me?" I stared at her. "What are you talking about?" She tapped the clipboard I had just read. "You were never meant to last. They gave you just enough memories to function, to imitate me. But there's a flaw in the imprinting." I stayed silent, but my fists clenched. They can't risk the groom or the public finding out. So after the wedding, she didn't finish. But she didn't have to. I was disposable. Everything inside me boiled. I didn't scream. I didn't cry. I walked up to her and stared her in the face, our face, and said one thing. Then they chose the wrong girl to play weak. That night, I didn't sleep. But I did plan. I remembered every corner of this estate, every glance Eleanor gave me, every phrase James used when he talked about new beginnings. New beginnings for who? For them. But not anymore. I went back into the hidden room once the house was asleep. This time, I wasn't afraid. I took every file with my name, every video, every blood sample record, every behavioral report. And then I did something they never expected. I mailed them. To myself. The next morning, I walked into the dining room like nothing happened. Eleanor looked up from her tea with that rehearsed smile. "Did you sleep well, dear?" I smiled back. Like a weapon being sharpened. She blinked. "Sorry," I said, like a baby. I covered, sipping my tea. But her hands hesitated just slightly. A flicker. She heard me. Good. Let her wonder. Let them all wonder. Later that afternoon, James found me in the garden. He had that same comforting posture, the soft voice, the caring eyes. But I knew now. Those eyes didn't love me. They studied me. You've been quiet lately, he said, kneeling next to the rose bush. I looked at him, tilting my head slightly. Did you ever love her? He froze. Who? The original, I whispered. He didn't answer. I stepped closer. Or was it always just about control? He looked at me, slow and careful, and then said it was about design. Boom. There it was. No more pretending. No more scripted dinners and polite smiles. You were never supposed to remember this much, he added. But you adapted faster than expected. I took a step back. So what now? Do you report me? Deactivate me? Replace me with another clone from the basement? His silence was louder than a scream. I nodded slowly. Well then, I whispered, you should know something too. He raised a brow. I wasn't the backup, I said. Then I stepped forward and leaned into his ear. I was the weapon you built too well. That night, I didn't wait for them to make the next move. I made mine. I put on the wedding dress. I walked into the grand ballroom where the rehearsal was to be held. Every eye turned to me, expecting a glowing bride. But what they saw was a woman walking in with files in one hand and fire in the other. I stood at the center of the room and said one sentence. This is not a wedding. This is an exposure. Gasps. Whispers. Eleanor stood, her face ghost white. James took a step toward me, nervous now. And I smiled. Because finally, I wasn't part of their design. I was the glitch that would destroy it. The wedding that never happened. The air was too still. The kind of stillness you feel right before thunder cracks the sky. Only this time, the storm wasn't in the clouds. It was in my chest. I stood at the center of the ballroom, dressed in white. But not for them. Not for James. Not for Eleanor. For the truth. And today, the truth was going to be dressed in fire. Whispers spread like spilled wine across marble floors. What's going on? Where's the priest? Why is she holding papers? I raised the folder high in one hand. Good evening, I said calmly, like a host at a gala. Before we begin this wedding, I'd like to share a story. Eleanor stood up from the front row, her smile glued tight but cracking at the edges. Sweetheart, this isn't the time. I turned to her slowly. Her mouth shut before I even spoke. It's exactly the time, Eleanor. The only time I'll ever have. James didn't stand. He watched calculating. He knew what this was, and that thrilled me. I took a breath and faced the guests. My name is not Evelyn Matthews, I began. Gasps rippled like aftershocks. That was the name they'd all been told. The woman James was marrying. The charming, polished, well-bred heiress. But that wasn't me. My real name was never on any invitation, because I wasn't invited into this life. I was inserted. I opened the file and pulled out the first photo. It was of subject 0021 and subject 022, little girls in a lab, dressed in hospital gowns, holding hands like strangers trying to pretend they were sisters. I held it high. This is who I really am. A backup. A design. A replacement when the original ran away. I turned toward James. Tell them, James. Tell them how I was built to mimic the woman you lost. How you used me to salvage your precious project. Eleanor stepped forward now, her voice sharp like porcelain shattering. Enough. These lies, I dropped another photo. Eleanor and James standing in a sterile lab behind the glass, watching us. You raised her like a daughter, I said. But you raised me like a tool. I turned back to the guests, socialites, investors, journalists, heirs. Ask yourselves this: why would a couple who lost their only daughter a year ago suddenly find a girl who looks exactly like her down to the scar behind her ear? Eyes widened, hands covered mouths. I dropped the final document, a contract, one that binds me to James, not for love, but for control, to secure family wealth, legal dominance, and silence. James finally stood. All right, he said. Calm, calculated, classic James. She's had a mental break. This is what we feared. Let's get her some help. I raised my hand. Sit down. And for the first time, he did. Because he saw it in my eyes. I wasn't bluffing. I wasn't broken. I was dangerous. Behind me, the ballroom doors opened. Two men entered, attorneys. Ones I had hired in secret. Ones I had sent the files to in advance. One held up a court-stamped envelope. We're here to serve legal notice. Evelyn Matthews, AKS Subject 0021, is filing for immediate annulment and criminal investigation into identity manipulation, psychological abuse, and financial coercion. Eleanor's legs buckled. Someone screamed. Cameras' phones flashed and clicked. The wedding had turned into a scandal in real time. I stepped off the stage, still in my dress. The aisle they had built to lead me to a husband now led me straight to the exit. Outside, the wind hit me like applause. Freedom. Not quiet, not pretty, but earned. And as I stepped into the waiting car, one of the attorneys handed me a black envelope. There's more, he said. From the original. He paused. She wants to meet. I stared out the window as the mansion faded behind me. That house built on lies. That legacy built on stolen lives. I wasn't part of it anymore. I was something else now. Not the bride. Not the backup. Not the experiment. The weapon. And I was just getting started. The one who ran first. The meeting place was an old motel on the edge of nowhere. Not the kind with glowing signs and room service. The kind where secrets could breathe and past could hide. I walked through the cracked doorway, my heels echoing against the dusty floor. There were no cameras here. No handlers. No rich people in tailored suits pretending they cared. Just her. She stood by the window, hooded, her silhouette barely visible in the dying light of late afternoon. My heart didn't race. It slowed. Because this wasn't just another confrontation. This wasn't the climax. This was the beginning of a reckoning. She turned, pulling back the hood. And there she was. My mirror, but cracked. The same eyes. The same lips. But her expression was empty, like someone who had already lost everything and wasn't sure if she missed it. You came, she said simply. I had questions, I replied. Do you want answers or closure? She asked, voice low. I stepped closer. I want both, but I'll settle for the truth. She nodded and gestured to the only chair in the room. I didn't sit. I needed to stay taller than her just this once. I ran when I was 16, she began. They told me I was part of something bigger, that I had a purpose. But every time they said purpose, I felt like I was dying. She looked at me. I saw the files, the tests, the medications. They said I was unstable, that I lacked emotional adaptability. I raised an eyebrow. So they replaced you. She nodded. They called you the refined version, the patient one, the perfect emotional match. I swallowed. So you knew they made me? She looked away. I didn't just know. She paused, and then I agreed to it. I flinched. For all the horrors I expected, I hadn't expected that. You what? She stood now, almost level with me. I was 17. Broken. Angry. They told me I could walk away from it all, but they needed someone to fulfill the contract. Someone who could pass as me. Someone who wouldn't question the marriage, the money, the politics. I let them create you. She stepped closer, eyes dim. I didn't think you remember. I took a shaky breath, everything inside me twisting. So I was your escape plan. Yes, she said. And I was your prison. We stood in silence. The kind that tastes like blood. I stared at her face, the one that had haunted my dreams without a name. And I saw it now. She didn't look powerful. She looked tired. You didn't come here to confess, I said. She shook her head. No, I came to warn you. She pulled a folder from her coat and slid it across the dusty table. Inside were photos. Not of me. Not of her. Of another girl. Same face. Younger. With electrodes on her temple and a file labeled subject 0023. I stared at it, heart sinking. They're still making more? She nodded. They didn't stop with us. We were just the start. And now, they don't need sisters, they want obedience. I closed the folder slowly. So, what do you want from me? She finally met my eyes. To finish what I ran from. I stared at her, unblinking. She added, You have the name now. The press. The files. You have power I never had. But you're only halfway out. She stepped closer, so close I could hear the tremble in her breath. They'll come for you. Not to silence you, but to reprogram you. You're still theirs, whether you admit it or not. I exhaled slowly. I'm not theirs. She touched my hand gently. You're not mine either. That hit harder than I thought. And yet, she was right. I wasn't hers. I wasn't theirs. I was me, whoever that was now. She turned to leave, but I stopped her. One more thing. She turned. Why now? I asked. Why meet me after all this time? Her eyes were glass. Because I saw what you did at the wedding, and for the first time, I was proud of who they created. She walked into the night, swallowed by shadow, and I stood alone, file in hand. Subject 0023. Another girl. Another fate. But I wasn't done. Not yet. In the weeks following the divorce, Grace thought she had finally found a semblance of peace. The chaos that once consumed her life seemed to settle into quiet, determination as she focused on preparing for her child's arrival. But just when she believed the storm had passed, a new wave of challenges crashed over her, this time from the relentless glare of the media. Reporters began circling like vultures, eager to dissect every detail of her high-profile separation from Mark Marino. One afternoon, Catherine Sinclair, a journalist known for her sharp investigative skills and sensational headlines, approached Grace with an offer too tempting for most: exclusive rights to her story in exchange for a hefty sum. This could be your chance to tell your side, Catherine urged, her voice smooth yet insistent. People deserve to know the truth about Mark. Grace, however, refused to let desperation cloud her judgment. She remembered Elizabeth's advice during their late-night talks: the world will try to exploit your pain. Don't give them the satisfaction. With unwavering resolve, Grace declined. My priority is my son, she said firmly, her tone leaving no room for negotiation. I won't drag him into this circus. Her refusal only fueled the media frenzy, but Grace remained steadfast, shielding her unborn child from becoming collateral damage in a public spectacle. Yet the scrutiny didn't stop there. Days later, a chilling letter arrived at her doorstep, its contents sealed within a plain white envelope. Inside was a single sheet of paper bearing a typed message. Stop digging into Mark's offshore accounts if you know what's good for you. You don't want to wake up one day and regret it. No signature, no return address, just a cold warning from someone claiming to be a former colleague of Mark's. Fear coiled around Grace's heart like a snake, tightening with each breath. Was this person truly connected to Mark? Or was it merely an attempt to intimidate her into silence? For a fleeting moment, doubt crept in. Perhaps she had pushed too far, unearthed secrets better left buried. But then she felt her baby kick, a gentle reminder of why she fought so fiercely. Placing a protective hand over her belly, Grace whispered softly, "We're safe. I promise." She realized that fear would always linger, but surrendering wasn't an option. Every threat only strengthened her resolve. If Mark thought he could use proxies to scare her off, he underestimated the depth of her resilience. That evening, Grace called Samantha Zhao, her trusted private investigator. "I need you to double-check everything we've uncovered," she instructed, her voice steady despite the tremor beneath. "If there's anyone else involved, I want to know who they are." Samantha assured her she'd dig deeper, vowing to leave no stone unturned. Together, they fortified their defenses, ensuring no trace of evidence could be compromised. Grace knew the road ahead wouldn't be easy. The shadows of Mark's empire still loomed large, threatening to engulf her at every turn. But she also knew this. She was no longer the woman who sat paralyzed by betrayal months ago. She was a mother, a fighter, and a protector of the life growing inside her. And nothing, not the press, not anonymous threats, not even Mark himself, would stand in her way. Under the silvery glow of the moon, Grace stood on the balcony, her hands resting lightly on the railing as she gazed down at the lush garden below. The air was cool against her skin, carrying with it the faint scent of jasmine, a reminder of nights spent, dreaming of a future that now felt both distant and painfully close. Her mind drifted to Marisol Hernandez, her late grandmother, whose words had been etched into her soul like an unbreakable vow. Sometimes to rebuild, you must destroy what is old. Those words resonated more deeply tonight than ever before. Grace's journey had been one of fire and ash, a crucible that tested every ounce of her strength. She thought about Mark, the man who once promised her love and security, but instead left behind betrayal and ruin. Yet, even in the wreckage of their marriage, she found something unexpected: herself. No longer was she the woman who tiptoed around fear or sought validation from others. Now, she stood tall, resilient, and fiercely protective of the life growing inside her. Her unborn son stirred gently, as if sensing her thoughts, and Grace placed a hand over her belly. "I won't let you grow up in a world built on lies," she whispered, her voice steady despite the weight of emotion swelling within her. "You will know honesty, courage, and independence, not because I'll shield you from pain, but because I'll teach you how to face it." The scars of the past still lingered, sharp and unyielding, but they no longer defined her. Instead, they fueled her resolve. Every threat, every betrayal, had shaped her into someone stronger, someone capable of shielding her child from the shadows of deceit. As the wind rustled through the trees below, Grace imagined the lessons she would impart to her son: never to rely on empty promises, never to settle for less than he deserved, and always to value truth above all else. For the first time in months, Grace felt a flicker of peace. The road ahead would be long, fraught with challenges she couldn't yet foresee, but she was ready. With determination burning bright within her, she silently vowed to raise her son in a world where resilience triumphed over despair, a legacy forged not by wealth or power, but by integrity and love.